All right, it is a time for Talk Back, and we have a plethora of wonderful folks waiting to visit with us today. We got them all lined up. So, first of all, my friend Lonnie Hutchison is joining me. Hi, Lonnie. How are you?
Good morning, Peter. I'm well. How are you?
Doing fantastic. So let's start this thing off. We want to talk about safety, right?
Yes, child passenger safety to be specific.
Okay.
This is National Child Passenger Safety Week, and I'm excited to share with folks all the good information of stuff that's going on this week. And I brought with me this morning several of our Buckle Up Montana Coalition members, and they will share with you various aspects of what they're doing to celebrate this particular week. It's a national focus on childhood injury prevention in the way of traffic crashes. Traffic crashes continue to be the #1 cause of death for children, and so many of those could absolutely be prevented if children are correctly restrained in child safety seats and booster seats, and then when old enough, in their seat belts.
Yeah, we just had several news reports in the last 2 days. One up by Fort Benton, where 3 young teenagers were killed. They were not buckled in to a truck. One, I believe, in Idaho, where a couple of youngsters were killed. They were not properly restrained either. So when you see that, and of course the news story always states they were not buckled in.
And thankfully, the news is reporting that, because I think
Yeah.
it causes people to pause and think about it more, you know. Well, the Buckle Up Coalitions in Montana and the Buckle Up Montana Coalitions are a program of the Montana Department of Transportation. And so all of those coalitions this week are trying to get the word out to promote child passenger safety. And that's why we're here today. And I'm willing to turn the mic over to some of my other members, unless
I know you've got a lineup
so many here. Yes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start talking to some of these folks.
Let's do, John. Thank you.
So should we get Danette in first? And there she is. I just talked to you on the phone the other day. How are you, Danette?
I'm good. How are you?
This is Danette Fadness. And now what is your position?
I am the coordinator for Safe Kids Missoula Coalition, which is led by the Foundation for Community Health.
All right. So tell us exactly, because I feel like I just asked you these questions the other day. Tell us exactly what it is you do.
Well, what I wanted to talk about is that Safe Kids Worldwide is the certifying body for child passenger safety technicians, and that child passenger safety technicians must go through a 4-day training and recertify every 2 years. This year, 42 new technicians were trained and certified in Montana.
A child passenger safety technician.
Yes.
It sounds like you're building something. What is it that they do?
Well, they're going to come in a little later and tell you more.
Oh, okay.
We don't want to give it away. We don't want to give it away. It's kind of like Christmas. You got to wait a little bit. Yeah. So.
Well, during Child Passenger Safety Week, we want to remind all parents to register your car seat and take action.
I had never heard that you need to register a car seat. What's the deal with that?
When you buy your car seat, it comes with a little card, and often people just toss that.
Yeah, see ya.
You can fill out that card, mail it in, and there's always the option to go online and do that. If you didn't do that with your car seat, you can go out to your manufacturer now and register it online. In 2014, they found that 6 million car seats were recalled for safety defects.
Wow.
Which was the largest car seat recall in U.S. history.
Well, they were recalling airbags, and of course, when you have a car, it's obviously you're the registered owner, so they just contact you to bring it in and get it fixed. But they can't do that with a car seat unless they know you own it, right? Okay.
Right, and so you have to pay attention to recalls. It's just easier to do that up front.
Okay, all right.
They found that fewer than half of those car seats that were recalled ever received the necessary repair. So it's really an important thing to do.
What kind of repairs traditionally need to be done to a car seat? Just little adjustments, or maybe a new clip or a new belt, or
new
what?
Clips, or if something might get sticky and they won't come unhooked. Those kinds of
and trust me,
safety
child
defects.
safety seats get sticky. I say this firsthand experience. Those missing fruit jellies, they go somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. All right.
So what we're saying now is, make sure to go out there and get your car seats registered online through the manufacturer. And also to check on recalls, because there were so many in 2014, you can visit, I went ahead and just added the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration website to the Safe Kids Missoula Facebook page, so that it was easy to tell you guys how to go out there and get to that link so you can go check on the recalls.
Now you've got an event coming up, right, where people can get their you actually make an appointment to get your seat tested, right?
On Saturday at the Missoula Rural Fire.
Okay.
Are they going to be tested by approved technicians?
Yes.
Okay.
Certified technicians.
Certified
through Safe Kids.
Right.
There we go.
So, and then I also wanted to just mention that, besides registering your car, it's important to know when you can graduate your child into a booster seat. Booster seats reduce the risk of injury by 45% compared to seatbelts alone. So it's really important to know that. Buckle Up Missoula and Safe Kids Missoula will have the opportunity for parents to learn more about booster seats at the Safe Kids Fair. Coming up on Sunday, October 4th, from 12 to 3 on the community campus.
Give me the short message here, because I got an 8-year-old daughter who's been using a booster seat, wants to get out of it. When do I say, okay, honey, fly free?
When she's 40.
Again, that's one of the technicians, but I hear
yeah.
49 inches tall, and there are weights. Again, there's people
Careful,
who have taken this 4-day course.
Careful with the weights.
But you can bring her to the Safe Kids Fair on October 4th, and we'll have like a little thing to find out if you're tall enough to be in a seatbelt. Have some examples of booster seats so that you know which one is best
Drop her
for
in a
your
Skinner
child.
box and get a free diagnostic analysis of my child.
Something like that.
Well, it's kind of like being at the carnival. You have to be at least this tall to ride this ride. Tell you what, we're up against a break, and we're going to come. We have all sorts of folks. We're going to try to get them all in this half hour. So if you have a question or a comment, by the way, give us a call. We'll be happy to pass it along to our amazing panel of experts, and we'll be right back with more in a moment.
Still be first.
We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. That's John King over there. I'm Peter Christian. We have a host. We should have like video of them coming and going. And there
is a photo on our Facebook page.
Yes.
It looks like the train out of Noah's Ark, if you've ever seen those photos.
All right. So right now we're visiting with Lisa Gochula.
Yes, sir.
Did I say it right?
You did.
Wow.
I'm impressed.
I'm gonna go home now. I got something right. So Lisa, you are a certified CPS instructor trainer.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So tell us what you do then.
Sure. So I am not a trainer. I don't train other people,
Okay,
but I am
all
a
right.
technician.
A technician. Sorry. Yeah.
So people bring their seats in. I work at the Frenchtown Fire Department, and people can bring their seats in, and we take a look at them, make sure they're not recalled, make sure that they're installed correctly, and most importantly, make sure that the parents know how to install them correctly. It's not just me doing it for them. It's showing them how to do it so they can do it again in the future if they switch cars or
Well,
whatnot.
especially, when my kids were little, okay, back in the Stone Age, right, when I used to use my feet like the Flintstones. But anyway, the seat, the child safety seat was just a seat.
Sure.
And you buckled him in, and everything was good.
Right.
But things have really changed over the years, right? Because there's a lot more technology and a lot more inventiveness into making these things really secure.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot more technology in the seats and in the vehicles that they're going in.
Right.
They're trying to mainstream things a little bit to make them easier. I think that's a long ways off. But in the meantime, you just want to make sure that the seat you have fits in the car you have in the best way that you can.
Okay, let's get Jason over there. Jason
All right.
Butler's with Missoula Rural Fire. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring that. You don't have to. Yeah, we'll bring the microphone to you. There we go. Because he's
Thank you,
he's
Peter.
a tall guy. All right. So let's talk about from your perspective. You work out at Missoula Rural Fire, and you guys have a big event coming up to help folks with just this sort of thing, right?
Yes, that's correct, Peter. This Saturday we'll be doing our Seat Check Saturday checkup event at our Station 1. That's located at 2521 South Avenue West. It's right across Reserve Street from Shopco there. So we do ask that parents call in and make an appointment. That way we can help them out in a timely manner. Because we generally allot about a half-hour time period
Really?
to instruct the parents on one car seat in their vehicle. So if you do have 2 car seats in your vehicle, it's going to take us about an hour to get through it step by step and instruct you and show you how to do this.
Real quick question. let's just say you got 10 families that you're inspecting. Out of those 10, how many do you think have done something significantly wrong that could endanger their child?
Typically, we're seeing about 8 out of 10 car seats installed incorrectly.
Wow.
So there's just a lot of technology that you guys were talking about earlier with Lisa, and I think a lot of that can be confusing to parents when they're working with these car seats. And the newer vehicles, there's a lot of different options to install your car seats. So we go through all of that stuff with the parents step by step and let them make the decisions on what they feel will be easiest for them.
Let's talk for just a second about you put the child in. The child's already in the car seat, okay, and you put the child with the car seat in the car, and you bring the seatbelt across, and you're done. But it's not that simple, is it?
No. There's a lot of other things that we have to consider when we're putting them in there. Number one is the car seat itself restrained in the vehicle secure enough? How does the harness that the child's sitting in the seat, is that properly fitted to them? Because you have to set the harness to different levels, whether they're rear facing or forward facing and whatnot. So, and then with all the technology, like you guys talked about earlier, what are they using that new technology correctly?
Not to mention the little mutants keep growing, so things have to be shifted every once in a while, right?
You're correct. Yeah,
you can't just sit it and leave it.
Exactly. You have to make adjustments, and most of the seats do have adjustments as the kids grow that you have to keep up on.
All right. Now, let's talk about the various levels of seats that kids use. I mean, when you bring the baby home from the hospital, you have one seat, okay? And then as they begin to grow and get maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, is there a progression where you need to change seats?
Yes. And typically that's going to be based on the child's height and weight and the type of seat that you're using. We always recommend to parents to keep them rear-facing as long as possible, and as long as possible, meaning the child still fits the seat and the criteria to where they can sit rear-facing.
So, but why is it safer for them to be rear-facing rather than forward-facing? Because you like to look in the rearview mirror and smile and Google and make faces and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So think about this: 75% of the accidents that we get into are a frontal impact crash, right?
Right.
So when you and I get injured in a motor vehicle accident like that, typically our injuries are head, neck, and spine injuries from that frontal impact crash. With us facing the kid's rear in the vehicle, you have the whole back of the seat that actually kind of catches the child in the event of that accident. Sure. So it prevents the head, neck, and spine injuries.
And their heads are so heavy. Their heads are like
Correct.
50% of their body weight when they pop out. So.
25%.
Oh, is that? John was just joking, but it is an absurd statistic. Yeah.
So to think about that, I'm a 200-pound guy. If that was true for me, if my head weighed 25%, I'd have a 50-pound head,
right?
Which I don't.
Which most of us radio announcers do. Actually.
Bowling ball on a toothpick.
Exactly. Right. That's a good analogy.
Tell you what, I want to get Claudia and it's Miley. Is that right? Miley Kai. Can you guys come on in for a second? Because I want to make sure we spend some time with you folks as well, because you guys have stories to tell. So come on in here. It's Claudia and Miley Kai. All right. Wait. Here, hold my phone. Okay. Now, you must be Miley Kai.
Yes.
How are you?
Good.
Okay. Now, so tell me the reason why you're here today.
I was in a crash and I survived it.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit more about it? Where and when it happened, and what kind of car you were in, that sort of thing?
I was 16 months old.
Oh, okay.
We were on our way to Superior Spokane. Sorry.
Okay.
Going to the airport, and what kind of car was it?
It's like she doesn't remember being 16 months old.
Yeah, it was a while back. Yeah, that's okay. But the nice thing is your parents had you buckled in, and you survived this crash. But I understand you had a sibling that didn't. Is that correct? Oh, I'm sorry.
My mother.
Oh, your mom. Oh, I'm so sorry. So tell me what being here today means to you, to be on the radio, to talk to people. What kind of message would you like to deliver to folks?
Well, I am here today to make sure everybody's being safe on the roads and buckling up, because I don't want to have a family go through what mine did.
Mm-hmm. So you lost your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's just tremendous.
So when you see your friends on the bus and stuff, is this something that comes up?
Not much, but it just sometimes when people don't buckle up, it drives me crazy because I don't want anything to happen to other people.
Yeah.
And,
Kind of a watchman on the walls.
well, of course, well, you have a special reason to care because you did lose someone precious to you, and so that I'm sure that comes to your mind all the time. Then, right?
Yes, it does.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you being with us. It's very brave of you to talk on the radio. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Now, would you like to get on the radio here? Let's talk with. This is Claudia. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
How are you, Claudia?
I'm fine.
All right. Would you mind just sharing? Get a little bit closer to the microphone.
Okay.
And share a little bit of your story and why you're here today.
Well, a little over 11 years ago, I lost my youngest daughter.
Right.
And
That was Miley Kai's mom, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Miley Kai's mom, and she has a son, Mikkel. And so now, because she chose not to put her seatbelt on, which she knew better, she was thrown from the car, and
She was ejected.
she was ejected from the car,
Right.
and she died a week later. In fact, she died on Father's Day and was buried on her 30th birthday. And I don't want to see another family go through what my family has gone through. It's been 11 and a half years, and the days do not get any better. And I just want people to realize, and I want them to understand, buckle up. The highway patrolman told my husband that Miley Kai's car seat, never moved.
Wow.
That's how good it was installed, and there's no reason, and people kind of complain. A lot of mothers I hear complain. Well, it takes time and effort, and I'm in a hurry, but it shouldn't be. Make sure that child is buckled up, and make sure that you're buckled up.
Yeah, and remember, the greatest protection for that child is probably your life, too. I mean, you got to remember to buckle yourself up if you're buckling up your child, because you need to be around there to help coach that child through life.
You bet.
That's right.
Okay, we're up against a break. We're going to come right back. And joining us in the studio next, Sergeant Greg Amundsen with the Missoula Police Department is going to be joining us to talk about the law enforcement end to this. So we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. In the few minutes we have remaining in this half hour, we want to keep the emphasis going here on safety for kids. I've got Sergeant Greg Amundsen. He's the traffic sergeant for the Missoula Police Department. Welcome, sir. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you this morning.
Now, what message would you? We've got only about 20 or 30,000 people listening to this program today. So, you as a law enforcement professional, you're with these folks who have had personal experience with tragedy and who are working hard to try to inform folks from a law enforcement end. Talk about your end of this.
Well, my end of it is I think the parents need to work to protect those kids. And what I always tell parents when I stop them, if they're not restraining their child correctly, is that child's not old enough to make the right choice for themselves. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, it's incumbent upon you to take care of your child and put them in the seat and make sure that the seat's installed correctly in the vehicle. All
right, so the onus is on mom and dad. You can't just put the child in and expect them to buckle themselves up.
Yeah, they can't do it. I mean, and so you do leave it to the parents. And then the other thing that I'd like to remind parents is, per Montana State Code, I think we all know that seatbelts are secondary violations, but a child restraint violation is actually a primary violation. It's not secondary.
Wow. So when a parent gets pulled over for speeding or a light being out or running a stoplight, are the officers instructed to kind of check on the child's safety when they check out the vehicle? We do look at it, and in particular, one of our traffic, motorcycle officers is a seat specialist. He's another one of the technicians. So he does that. He will, if it's not installed correctly, he will install it for them correctly during the traffic stop, and then may or may not cite them. Just kind of depends. Wow.
Now, what kind of penalty can you get for not installing or for not having your child buckle in?
To be honest, I don't know what the fine is. The court imposes
the biggest
the fine.
would be a dead child.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I would say the monetary part is probably the smallest.
Sure.
The least of your concerns.
All right. Well, Greg, thanks for coming in, man. Appreciate it.
Sure.
You bet. Can I get Lonnie? Come on here real quick. We got 30 seconds left. So tell us when this deal is on Saturday and where we can go and that sort of thing.
It's over at Missoula Rural Fire,
right.
Station 1 on South Avenue, and appointments are required. And I know that their schedule is fairly full already. However, they do offer seat checks the second Saturday of every month. I know this is not the second Saturday. It's because it's 19th, and it's
right.
National Seat Check Saturday, so it's special. But if they can't get in, this Saturday, then, make an appointment for next month, second Saturday. And Lisa out at Frenchtown Fire does seat checks by appointment every day of the week.
Thank you so much for stopping in. And thanks to all you guys. Okay, we're going to take a break and be right back. Even more guests in the studio this morning. We got Bob Seidenschwartz, the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio guy. It's a pleasure to see you, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good to be here.
That's John King, of course. I'm Peter Christian. We have a very distinguished guest on the phone who is visiting with us. It's kind of a shame she has to be in Bozeman, but, you got to be somewhere.
Right.
So would you please introduce our guest?
Yes. We have the British Consul General, Priya, who is actually in Bozeman attending I believe it's a technology summit.
It's a high-tech summit, right?
High-tech summit. So we've got the privilege of having her for 45 minutes to talk about Montana and UK relations as well as EU-US trade pact. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Priya, who's calling from the other white meat, as we described it earlier.
Exotic Bozeman.
Exotic Bozeman, Montana. So Priya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Now, remind the audience, Priya's been on the show previously, and we've had the pleasure of having her here in Missoula. So this is not her first time to the state, Bozeman or Missoula. So, Peter, if you'd like to get us started here.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind sharing the reason why you're in Bozeman for the High-Tech Summit, all the way from Great Britain.
Well, I'm actually the Consul General for this region, based in San Francisco, but we also lead on UK's relations with Montana, and it's actually my fourth visit here to the States. And we wanted to come because we saw this fantastic opportunity of a summit around the technology sector, organised by Senator Daines and his team, with a great array of really fantastic speakers, both from the local technology community, but also from the biggest players who have presence here. So we wanted to come down and be a part of it.
So, Priya, how much trade, let's set the stage a little bit. How much trade do we have between Montana and the UK? And you mentioned something earlier in terms of you're based out of San Francisco, so you've got responsibilities not just for Montana, but for several other states. So enlighten us a little bit in terms of what your role and responsibilities are as a Consul General.
So, as a Consul General, I represent the British government. In fact, technically, I represent Her Majesty the Queen in the northwest of the US. So, whilst I'm based in San Francisco, I cover California, obviously, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Idaho, and last but very much not least, Montana.
And so, when it comes to representing Montana, what sort of things do you do when you're engaging with Montana?
What we like to try and do is really see where there are opportunities to cement the relationship on so many different fronts. Of course, the UK and the US have been partners and allies for many, many years across all areas of whether that's culture, whether that's the military relationship, or whether that's business. And what we want to try and do is be a part of taking that relationship to the next level, trying to cement academic ties, for example. I was speaking with I know you probably don't want to hear this over there in Missoula, but I was speaking with MSU yesterday about how we might be able to strengthen academic ties, and we've had similar conversations when we've been in Missoula with colleagues there.
Well, if you really want to cement the relationship, you could just get Her Majesty the Queen to wear a Go Grizz jersey. That would be a good start.
As you know, Her Majesty the Queen tries to rise above such politics.
I'm thinking off with his head, Priya.
And recently, just to acknowledge, I believe the monarchy and Her Majesty is the longest reigning.
Yes.
How would we technically describe that and give full acknowledgement to that?
Longest reigning monarch in British history.
Right.
Is that correct, Priya?
That is absolutely correct. As of last Wednesday, Her Majesty became the longest reigning monarch in British history, surpassing the previous longest reign, which was, of course, of Queen Victoria, her great-great-grandmother.
So our hats off to the British people and Her Majesty. So as we continue with this conversation, so how much trade and what type of trade exists between the UK and Montana, and where are you starting to see some inroads in terms of being able to increase that type of relationship?
So if you're looking at the figures for 2014, Montana exported about $22 million of goods and services to the UK. It's the fourth largest EU market for Montana exports. And if you look at it going the other direction, Montana imported about $33 million of imports from the UK. And that's across a whole variety of sectors. If you're looking at the export side from Montana, a large number are actually around chemicals and chemical exports, but covering other areas including machinery, computer and electronics, transportation equipment, minerals, so a whole variety of Montana exports.
What kind of chemicals are we exporting to you, and what sort of things are we buying from you?
So in terms of the chemicals, I believe a significant proportion of that is pharmaceuticals. From imports, it crosses a whole variety of sectors.
Okay, we're up against a break, and Priya Guha is our guest. She's a British Consul General visiting. She, of course, represents the British government to this part of the country, and she's in Bozeman for the high-tech conference. So if you have a question or a comment, give us a call, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. We'll take a quick commercial time out. Be right back after this. 721-1290 is our number. This is Talkback, the Montana World Affairs Council on the Radio edition. Bob Seidenschwartz joining us here in studio. John King, I'm Peter Christian. Priya Guha, she's the British Consul General, is on the telephone with us from Bozeman.
So, Priya, just before we went to break, I wanted to ask, you're at a technology conference. So in Montana, I don't think we as Montanans tend to think of ourselves as a technology state. So what are the kind of companies that you are engage in conversation with? What do they do? And where is their potential applicability in terms of trade with the UK?
So the event that I attended yesterday was called the Montana High Tech Jobs Summit, organised, as I said, by Senator Daines and his team and the local technology community here in Montana. It brought together really a range of business players in the technology sector, from those who are local companies who've grown up here in Montana, and then also some of the bigger players like Oracle or Sequoia Capital, who have a presence elsewhere in the U.S., or global players, but are also building parts of their companies and investments here in Montana. And really, from a British perspective, for me, the event was to get a sense of where the sector is going to go. There's a huge opportunity around technology, particularly in a global economy as we have today. And there are many British companies who are looking to bring their ideas and their technologies to the US. And there's many Montana companies who are looking to internationalize and take their products overseas to global markets. So what we want to try and do as the British government is to be a part of that process, help British companies understand what the opportunities are here in Montana, and also help Montana companies expand and grow as they take their products overseas.
Now, Priya, this is Peter. Things have changed so much in the Montana economy over the last 40 years. We were lumber, we were mining, so much basically resource extraction. Our economy was based on that for many, many years. Things definitely have changed. So as you look at Montana from your perspective as the British Consul General, how do you see Montana's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to world trade?
Well, I think taking a slightly different angle to that question, Peter, actually one of the huge opportunities you do have is in terms of companies growing and expanding and investing here. The reason I say that is because you have a wonderful combination of different things here in Montana. You have great opportunity from a business sense. You've got an increasingly skilled workforce in lots of different areas. But also you manage to get the balance right between work and also living your life. And you have a beautiful state with many things that people are able to do in their spare time. And I think that combination of a really interesting work environment plus a great environment to live and raise a family is something that's incredibly appealing. So I think you will see increasingly investors wanting to live that opportunity and live that dream. So hopefully your local authorities here in Montana can make sure that the state is a place where people will want to do that, and I think it is already.
You know, we have a wonderful relationship with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Montana, and they have a tourism section that is totally devoted to keeping track of tourism dollars. I believe the last time I checked it was between $4 and $5 billion were spent in Montana by visitors, both from in this country and outside the country. What is the attraction for folks from Great Britain coming to Montana? What kind of things do they want to do when they get here?
So I was talking earlier primarily around the business community. So for that community, it would be understanding, what is the state like if they want to set up their business here? What are the opportunities? What's the infrastructure like if you have a technology company? Those sorts of things. But you rightly mentioned tourism, actually, and the UK is one of the big drivers for tourism here. British people love to come to the States, but they also particularly love to come and take advantage of the adventure tourism and the beautiful scenery that you have right here in Montana. So a lot of British tourists visit Yellowstone, for example, but also Glacier and other parts of the state. And I think the attraction is simply, the beauty of what you have on offer.
And the sheer amount of space that's available. As you had mentioned during the break, you can drive from one end of Montana to the other and maybe see 4 or 5 cars in some areas. It's amazing to see so much beauty with so few people, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something that's incredibly stunning and very striking for foreign visitors. And a real strength of the state, and one, as you rightly said right at the beginning, that is a huge contributor to the local economy.
I wanted to ask you a question. This might be a tough question, so you can forgive me if you ever come to Missoula directly. I'll ask for it. But you work with 6 different states, right? I think it's Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. I'm missing one. Is it Alaska? Alaska? When you compare and contrast these states and that the way that they deal with the UK, if you could rank them for us, give us some kind of insight, compare and contrast them for us. Because when we talk to our officials from Montana, of course, they're always going to say, we're doing a great job. But it would be nice to have someone, an outsider's opinion, if you would.
So I think there is the differential probably between the states that I have had the privilege to get to know a bit during my term as Consul General. It's really those states that already have a very strong international culture and presence, particularly on the business side, and the states that are more sort of dipping their toes in the water of international business and particularly international investment. I think Montana, in that, has huge opportunity around international investment. I want to work with the authorities here in Montana to make sure that Montana is on the horizon for British companies wanting to come to the US, and also that international opportunities are on the horizon of Montana businesses. And I think that can only serve to really strengthen both of our economies and both of our cultures and everything else that comes with that great strength and friendship that we have between the UK and Montana.
Are our authorities doing a good job of reaching a hand out in the other direction?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yeah, our authorities, Montana's authorities, are they doing a good job of reaching out to the UK to make those business transactions, or are there things we need to learn?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been discussing with the people that I've met on this visit, as I mentioned, Senator Daines was organising the summit yesterday, and I had time to talk this through with him. I also had the privilege of meeting the governor yesterday as well to talk through the opportunities. And I think all of the people I've met here in Montana, whether it's from the government side or indeed from the business community or from academia, are all committed to really making Montana a place that is truly international for opportunity. And that's something that I know they're committed to, and I know they want to work with us and other governments to make that a reality.
Priya, we're going to have to go to a break. When we come back, I want to kind of pivot off of John's question because there's a couple of very important insights within that. And also, in talking about governors and senators and such, I have a couple of questions in that realm. So we will go to a break and we'll be back shortly.
Okay, Priya Guha, our guest, and we do have 2 lines open, by the way, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. You're also welcome to make your comments or questions on our Facebook page. We'll be right back.
Oh, really?
Talkback continues. This is the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. We do have a couple of lines open, 721-1290. British Consul General Priya Guha is joining us in the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. So, Bob, you opened with a question. So,
yeah, just kind of pivoting off of John's question in terms of how good of a job are we doing if Priya is giving feedback to us, and especially if you are in front of a number of, say, high school students within the state of Montana. What message would you be delivering to them in terms of relationships, job opportunities, and skill sets. And the other part of my question was, we recently had Consul General Andy David from Israel here, and there's the discussion of putting a trade mission together next spring. And he had said, if you had your governor attending that mission, that actually has more significance than congressmen and senators representing the state, because the governor is effectively the head of state in Montana or any of the other states. So, Priya, can you please take those questions as I've posed those?
Sure. I mean, I think, to start with, if you look at the UK and the US, we have so many natural things in common. Things like...
And that about wraps it up. That we're totally different, clearly. We've lost a line with Priya, apparently.
So we're going to have to let that go, and she'll give us a call back. Anyway,
maybe take a quick break? And
we could certainly do that. We got a nice long 3-minute break here, so we'll do that. 721. Well, don't you call. We have to give Priya to call back now. So hopefully we'll get that reestablished. It's high tech.
3 lines.
It's high tech at its best.
And there she is. When it works, it's a beautiful thing.
She's at a high tech summit, for crying out loud. Somebody cut the string. All right. So somebody cut the string that was connecting our 2 tin cans.
We got really worried because you said you were going to compare the similarities between U.S. and U.K. and then you just stopped. It was dead silent.
Luckily, there are a few to talk about. So I was just actually just going to say that we have a shared language, we have a shared history, we have shared culture, we have shared political ties. But fundamentally, what brings the UK and the US closer together is actually the fact that we share the same values and that our peoples are really connected like no other. What that means, I think, in today's global world is that there is huge opportunity, particularly if we're thinking about, high school kids or even younger, frankly, to think about the world as a small place and to think about the opportunities and experiences that they can get by engaging in that world, whether that's looking at things virtually from your own home. Now you can engage with people in schools all over the world and different places all over the world. And that's an amazing opportunity, I think, for people who are the younger generation. You asked also about trade missions, Bob,
yes.
And particularly about whether it made a difference in terms of who's leading that delegation. I mean, I think I would take a slightly different perspective than maybe my colleague who you mentioned, just because I think for me the idea of a trade mission is that it really represents the best of the state and all the strengths of the state. So obviously it's great when you have Montana businesses who can be part of those trade missions. And I think aligning that with the political leadership of the state, whether that's from the governor's side, who of course is a wonderful figurehead for these sorts of missions, but also from the congressional delegation or indeed from the community level, is a really strong message to say that Montana is serious, Montana wants to be part of that international engagement, and that you have a cross-section of the community being the standard bearer for that message.
So along those lines, there's an example of a distinction in terms of how one entity, in this case, Andy David, would view that situation. And your comments, and Peter was mentioning offline, we've got this wonderful resource, Udo Fluke at the University of Montana, who specializes in helping people understand cultural differences of do's and don'ts, especially if you're either a tourist or a business person. So if we're going to Britain, what are some of the things that we should not do as, your cousins across the pond?
So we'll be welcomed back again when we decide to come back.
You, of course, be always welcome in the UK. But, we have a joke, don't we, that the UK and the US are two countries divided by a common language. And I think that's often very true because we have so many similarities in how we do things, but the odd things that are different really stand out. We were joking in the break about the differences between football and soccer, and even after 4 years here in the States, I still find it quite confusing to understand which sport we're actually talking about. But actually, really, when you talk about the US and the UK, there are many, many similarities in how we do things, how we think, how we act. And what you'll find in the UK is a very warm welcome for Americans in America. And I've seen that very much as a Brit coming here to visit Montana too.
Because people love your accent. I mean, we could sit and listen to you talk all day long. You have such a lovely voice and such a lovely accent. I think that you have a built-in advantage. I think for some of us who, there are so many different dialects, in Great Britain. There are also many different dialects in this country because I do voices. That's what we do.
It's
here.
also helpful to be able to fly around on an umbrella. It's got to be a perk of the job.
Oh, John is so witty, isn't he? And Priya actually is truly even more charming in person. So we do welcome her back to Missoula next time she's passing through. So Priya, we're going to, I believe, have to go to a break shortly.
Yeah.
When we come back, let's kind of move into U.S.-EU trade negotiations and what that actually means for Montana. Because right now it is political season here in the U.S. and everybody tries to make hay out of something. So give us a little insight to what this means, what are the benefits, and to the point, what are some of the sometimes pitfalls.
And I really want to know what you think of Donald Trump.
Well, they've got their own Donald Trump right now in Britain running for the Labour Party, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, he already won.
Yeah, so we've got some real interesting characters on both sides
So
here. So
we're going to come right back. By the way, we have two lines open, 721-1290. We'll be right back.
Actually, he'd be more.
And we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. John King, Bob Seidenschwartz, Peter Christian joining us on the telephone. The British Consul General is visiting with us from Bozeman. That is Priya Guha. So go ahead, Bob.
We only have Priya here for another basically 10 minutes, correct, Priya? So I want to get to, do we have in place right now a U.S.-EU free trade agreement, or is that still in the process of being negotiated?
So that's actually still being negotiated. We're in the latter stages of those negotiations, but it's in essence a free trade agreement that will allow free trade between the whole of the US and the whole of the European Union. So it's about a third of the global economy that we bring together in such an agreement, so a huge prize for everybody concerned.
So what does this actually mean for us here in Montana and the U.S. if this agreement is successfully completed?
Well, this agreement is really a very unique agreement in many ways. It's a very different type of agreement because we're not just looking at reducing tariffs, which is one of the common things that you do when you're looking at a free trade agreement. Actually, in this agreement, because we're talking about two very similar types of economies, very similar developed economies, we're actually looking at things like recognizing each other's standards so that companies don't have to go through multiple different sets of regulation which were set up to achieve the same thing. If we actually manage to deliver the type of comprehensive agreement that we hope to, we think it would bring about $125 billion to the U.S. economy, creating about 750,000 jobs here. When you bring that to the Montana level, it will actually have the potential to increase Montana exports to the European Union by 19%, so almost 20% increase in exports to the EU, boosting employment here in the state of Montana by about 2,400 jobs.
And this money
so that's a huge impact.
This large amount of $125 billion, it's just coming because we are diverting those wasted resources from duplicative work across country lines? Or is there some other reason why there's this big number behind the deal?
Well, basically, once you take out the barriers to trade, we expect to see a huge increase in trade between the two economies. And that's where you see the economic prize, $125 billion for the U.S. economy. And that's something that will come from businesses being able to go about doing their business, whether that's agricultural exports, whether that's pharmaceutical exports from Montana. They'll be able to do that with much simpler processes, a much broader market, and therefore much more opportunity for that company and also the local communities concerned.
So, Priya, are you telling me that the French farmers are going to not block every road in their country if we start exporting Montana agricultural goods? Is that part of what could happen? Or we still have to be realistic that it's still going to be very challenging even if this agreement goes into place, because it's just human nature?
So agriculture is a key part of the negotiations, and one of the elements that is being thrashed out in the final stages of these negotiations is exactly how we will open up agricultural markets on both sides. We've had British lamb being prohibited to be imported into the US for many years now. So it works in both directions. And what we're trying to do is sensibly open up those markets and ensure that the consumers have the choice, whether that is buying beef from Montana or whether that's buying beef from France, that they have the chance to do that, and that's the opportunity that's created by free trade agreements.
When the UK looks at the US, and we were talking earlier about tariffs not being the main focus major between these two countries, what are the big barriers between trade?
Well, I talked a bit about the main prize of this agreement, which is really this removing the burden of regulation. If you have, let's talk about pharmaceuticals, for example. Here in the US, if a company has a pharmaceuticals product, they not only have to go through all of the FDA processes to basically get that product approved for sale here in the US, but then if they want to bring that product to the EU, to the UK, they have to do a very similar set of processes in the European Union. So what we're trying to say with this agreement is, that's really daft. We're living in a world where these two economies have very, very similar values, very similar high standards. So why can't we just have a situation where we recognize each other's regulation? So removing that extra burden from somebody who's wanting to engage in very sensible and high standards of business practices all over the world.
And if pharmaceuticals are indeed one of the major exports from Montana to the UK, that would have a direct impact.
It would, absolutely. So we expect that pharmaceuticals would be one of the main sectors impacted from TTIP.
It's interesting that you would. It's interesting that you would say that pharmaceuticals play such a big part in exports from Montana, because to be honest with you, I'm thinking here in Missoula or in western Montana, I don't see a lot of pharmaceutical work going on.
Well, no. That's the only thing that comes to mind.
So where are these pharmaceuticals coming from, and what are their uses over there in Great Britain?
Well, I think one example of pharmaceuticals is actually the British company GlaxoSmithKline, who have a production facility right in Hamilton.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
So that's an example of a product that's been exported directly from the state, having been produced right here in the state. So that's just one example, and I'm sure there are many more that I'm not familiar with. But it's a great example of a trade that would necessarily increase if we were able to open up the opportunities.
So, Priya, this is really, as I start to think about this, we've had many discussions on this show in terms of next 30, 40 years, there's going to be a couple more billion people on the planet. So trade is a critical component of that type of integration, which means you also have to have the people who have the legal skills and, I hate to say this, but the bureaucratic skills to be able to put these things in place and to implement and to keep track of and make sure these things work. So are we prepared in terms of the skill sets that are necessary as we move forward, not just today, but in the decades forth?
So I think the honest answer is that if we make the environment to do international business, international trade simpler by doing things like reducing the barriers to trade, narrowing down the numbers of regulation that companies have to engage in to be able to do business, we're actually lowering the barrier for someone to be able to engage in international trade. So conversely, I think there's actually more opportunity for more people to engage in international trade if we have agreements like this in EU-US Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership tied up. If we have agreements like that, it actually enables more people, whether that's a small local manufacturer or handmade goods or something like that, to think about international markets and grow their business that way.
Now, Priya, we kind of joked a little bit before the last break about Donald Trump and the political season, but obviously you being based here in this country, whoever's in charge of the government, whichever party or whichever movement happens to be in charge, has to be of immense importance to you and to the way that that new regime or that new party or whatever is going to deal with Great Britain. So as you look on the political scene, is there anything that you see on the horizon that is either encouraging or troubling?
I think what is very true about the UK-US relationship in particular is that the relationship is so strong across so many different areas of our lives that actually the politics tends to not matter in many ways, because whether it's a left-of-centre politician in the UK and a right-of-centre politician here in the US, or vice versa, a left-of-centre politician here and a right-of-centre politician in the UK, what you've seen throughout is a really strong bilateral relationship between the two countries. And I think that will survive whoever is in power on either side in our countries.
I hope we could all say the same. If we could survive, who's in charge? Absolutely.
Well, and Priya is really speaking to shared commonality of values that will supersede whatever we have for 4 years or 8 years.
Right.
But there's no question the legislative impact does have an effect on countries and their relationships. So we would also be foolish to ignore that depending on who may be in office, that it does have an impact.
All right.
But it absolutely does have an impact. And I think, every government, and that's the wonderful nature of the democracies we live in, every government that's elected has a particular agenda they're elected on and will deliver that agenda. And, the world of diplomacy is partly as international countries engaging in overseas is to influence that agenda in a way that benefits our own country, the UK, but also our allies more broadly.
I'll tell you what, but we only have a couple of minutes to keep you here. So if you wouldn't mind, in the 2 minutes remaining, if you could just kind of wrap up for us about as you work and live in America as a representative of your country and the British people, how would you wrap up and say, hey, this could be the greatest job ever? In just working and having a chance to visit places like Bozeman and Missoula?
I would really, steal your words there, because for me, having this opportunity to live and work in the northwest of the US, I have absolutely no doubt that I have the best part of the US to work in. It's been an absolute privilege to be here for 4 years, to get to know the states that I cover, but also to get to know the people of those states. And universally, in the state of Montana, I've had amazing experiences meeting people from all different walks of life in the community here. And the one thing that I have to do on my bucket list is to come back with my family on holiday, which I will definitely do before we leave the States, because you've got so much to offer here. It's a great state, and I feel very privileged to be here.
Well, Priya, I see that you're a skier, and it looks like El Nino is going to bless California this year and punish the Pacific Northwest potentially. But if we get the snow, let's get you up here, because we love to do some skiing. And I have to say this, Bozeman's got some great skiing down there.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
The better to run away from the grizz on.
Well, I can tell you that I was telling my two boys, who are 6 and 9, and equally avid skiers, about exactly that point yesterday. So I think we might be back to skiing this season.
Fantastic. Right. Priya, it's been a pleasure, ma'am. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Priya, thank you again. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right, there you go. So we're going to take a little break. We kind of swept through our 40 break there, so we'll take 2 and 1, and we'll be right back with more in a moment.
So
we're back on Talkback 721-1290. That's John King, Bob Seidenschwartz staying with us, even though our guest from the wonderful folks in Great Britain, the British Empire, no longer with us. That's okay. Robert is still here.
She's got a wonderful accent.
She does. She's
and,
lovely.
I laugh
absolutely
because
lovely.
You can hardly watch a commercial on TV that isn't being pitched by somebody who's an Aussie or a Brit, because maybe we pay attention to their accents.
I'm trying to figure out. I think I've got the Geico lizard. I think I've got his voice narrowed down to either Liverpool or Manchester.
Well, I'd like to see a large tire roll over the Geico lizard. So, what's wrong with me? It's like, let's have him speak, and then boom.
Reach your hand through his chester and pull out his Liverpool.
Hopefully he has insurance.
Okay, wait, we just had a winner, right?
Yeah, we got a winner, and Bob won our car contest.
Not me, not this Bob.
No, not that Bob.
Different Bob.
But I did have a question for you, Bob, and since it's a financial question, I figure I'll throw it, and we have some open time.
Yes,
this morning I did some work on...
We have 7 minutes.
the U.S. and U.K. relations. And so I did, one of the things I do is I just go to Google, type in the names, and then hit news category and see what pops up. And over and over again, all of the Brits apparently were freaking out about interest rates in the United States jumping and causing their economy to crash. And I was reading articles from the British side of the pond saying that there are there's economic machinery in place to basically get the interest rate hikes started this week. And I wanted to ask you, is there any truth to that, or is this just concern? Or
a lot of over-anxiety about something that we've all been anticipating, really, quite frankly, for last couple of years. Remember, it's been over 8 years,
it's way
almost
overdue.
9 years
way overdue.
Since we've had any rate increases. So I think the addict, there's going to be a little withdrawal here, but that aside, there is some legitimate issues in terms of when you push the balloon too far in one direction. And we've had asset classes, principally stocks and bonds, reach levels that I think many reasonable people are saying are not sustainable.
Right.
There's a concern that if rates go and move even a quarter of a basis point, that somehow all the air is going to go out of the balloon. The market's already anticipated this in many ways. So whether it's next week, this week, or December, it really shouldn't be a surprise.
So let me ask you this. The way that the papers were talking, it was almost like that little trap that you set as a kid. You get the cardboard box, you put a stick under it, and something just moves the stick, and then bam, the whole house comes down and you're trapped. And the way I was reading these articles is it felt like the U.S. interest rates were that little tiny stick, and as soon as they move just a little tiny bit, boom, everything is crushed. And I guess I wanted to ask you, is that overly fearful, or what are
it is an overreaction to a long anticipated event. Now, why would that be the case? That's really the question you should ask yourself, is why are we so fearful? It's because we're worried about losing a lot of the money that's been made over the last couple of years in the increases in these assets. I think the biggest concern is the asset bubbles and the liquidity issues. Remember, legislation, Dodd-Frank, put into place that banks have to keep so much in terms of their reserves, which then makes, from the standpoint of liquidity, should we start to see a lot of sell-offs, who's going to make the markets? Who are the houses out there, the banking, the brokerages, the various other entities that typically act as kind of those absorbers, so that if the banks have to keep these ratios, these leverages in place, there's some concern about liquidity issues. Should you start to see a lot of different asset classes starting to be sold? One
of the other big stories that I was reading about this morning had to do with the trade imbalance. It's famous. We've had a trade imbalance for years in America.
There's nothing new there. Right.
But apparently it's dropped in the last year by like 8% or near that. I was wondering if you could give me some details on that.
What that would signal immediately is nobody's buying what you're selling. And what does that really mean? Basically, European economy slowing?
No. In the good way. So the imbalance has dropped. So we are now exporting 7% more, I guess you could say, instead of 7% less.
The balance has turned to our favor a little bit.
And those are, look, I'm not going to say, I am not qualified to really give you a deep insight to what that means. What I've learned over the years, these things are very fluid. So while that's good for our businesses, then I'm always looking at the inverse. What does that mean for our trade balance? Is it because lower oil prices? That's part of the equation. Oil prices have dropped almost 50-60% from where they were at their highs. And a lot of what the U.S. still does, people don't realize this, we're not energy independent at this point. We produce about 9.5 million barrels. We still use about 17 on a daily basis. So we're still having to bring oil in. So that's a part of that trade balance to our favor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as I have always said, and you laugh at me when I say this, but there's no such thing as good or bad economic news.
Well, and that's the point I'm trying to make, Peter, is that, as we overreact constantly to information, whether it's on the dollar increasing or decreasing or the interest rates going up. I mean, this is a 24/7 news cycle world, so things react very quickly. But the reality is you could see them raise rates and not increase rates again for several more quarters. They are going to assess the global economy, and one of the mandates of the Fed is to make sure that they don't upset the apple cart. So it's not a given that rates are going to go up when they meet again here shortly.
That's tomorrow.
Right.
Is
Right.
when the
And
meetings start.
In fact, if you're a betting guy, if you want to go to Vegas, the odds have increased that they're not going to raise rates as a result of news coming out of China. And of course, now Europe is dealing not only with its own economy, but a huge issue.
Sorry, well, if you're a betting guy, you bet what?
You would bet that rates are not going to move. Recently, the over-under has moved in favor of those who think rates are not going to go up.
So here's the thing that I find I just don't understand. You know, we've had the economy crashed. Oh boy, it's been a while, right? 2009,
2008,
2008,
and 2008, 2009, and we are far. I mean, you know, half a decade or greater past that date.
Right.
Well, everybody talks about how we're moving along. We're getting things going.
Structurally, we are in much better shape today.
The
than
U.S.
we were.
is outperforming the rest of the world. Then why the heck haven't we gone back to normal rates?
It's because of the entirety of the whole global contagion. And look, the best way I can describe it is, you know, it's 4 a.m. Everybody's been partying all night long, and now the sun's coming up, and you got to sober up because you have to go to work. We have been over-leveraged globally for many, many years. Countries have borrowed too much. Consumers have borrowed too much. Businesses, in some cases, overextended. We are over-leveraged. This is part of a long-term deleveraging process.
But by raising the rates, wouldn't the U.S., because most of the finances run through the U.S., wouldn't we be the beneficiary?
We could attract more capital to the U.S. as money is very fluid.
Sure.
And as interest rates go up, you're looking at negative rates in Europe and many countries. So that's part of, but just what I said, money is fluid. So what you receive today is not what you may have tomorrow. Look, I've said this so many times on this show. The best thing you can do nationally and domestically is make your own economy strong. Take some of the regulatory bent away. Start creating through both policy, initiative, and that goes to interest rates, it goes to legislation, regulation, and we got to go.
Debt-free.
Well, debt-free is not, look, having some debt's not a bad thing necessarily. Look, my colleagues are going to be on next Tuesday. So we're going to have an hour and a half to really kind of take this from start to finish to give a good dissertation on many of the questions that you're asking here today, Joe.
But on a personal level, it's good to be debt-free.
Well, when times are tough and you're looking at having to, you know, tighten the belt, you don't want a lot of debt, hence leverage.
Right.
And too many people, the housing bubble was a classic example of people living beyond what they were capable of.
And you sure as heck don't want stupid debt. You know, like buying a new motorcycle you don't need.
You
or
bought that boat because you were going to go to the lake every weekend, and you don't go to the lake every
what's
weekend.
coming up tomorrow, John Boy?
So tomorrow we have
the political science folks.
science folks. Abhishek Chatterjee and Karen Adams will be on to talk about India.